Good afternoon, everybody. My name is AJ Kuftik. I'm Principal Technologist with Expedient. I'm super excited that you're here and you've joined us today. We're gonna talk about automating at scale with our Expedient Enterprise Cloud, and it's a really fun demo. And let's get into this. First, I want to go through some housekeeping. So if you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A panel that is part of Zoom. It helps us keep track of the questions. John White, our Chief Innovation Officer, and Rob McCafferty, our Director of Solution Architecture, will be answering questions in the chat during the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. If you ask a question, you're entered to win a prize. That is a Bose speaker. So if you go in and enter the question, there's a raffle, and we'll announce that at the end. If you have to step away for any reason or you miss something and you want to go back to it, don't worry. This is all being recorded. It'll be on our website and our YouTube channel, and you'll get a link following out of this. So for those of you new to Expedient, we were founded in 2001. We started as a co-location company and moved into managed services and cloud. We have cloud locations in US East, Central, and West. Our West region in Phoenix just opened in the end of 2019. We also have international cloud deployments on customer sites in Australia, Germany, and Canada. So if you don't want to use our cloud locations in the US, we can help bring the cloud to you. We've also been a VMware cloud provider since 2007. We have almost 40,000 VMs on our platform. We have a massive scale across our environment, and we've been doing it for a very, very long time. So before we talk about automation, let's talk about work. At Expedient, we like to group work into two groups. There's AC work and CF work. AC work are things like business projects, things that drive revenue to the business, or internal projects where we re-architect to provide better resiliency. And these are projects where if you do really well, you get an A, and everybody says you did a great job, you get kudos, all hands emails, those sorts of things. And if you do them poorly, you get a C. You tried to improve, you had an idea, you were really trying to make a difference in the business. On the other hand, we have CF work. Those are things like unplanned work, so that's break fix. And we also have planned work. Those are the things like patching and configuration management and policy changes. And if you do those really well, you get a C. You get a thanks, hey, thanks for taking care of that for me. But if you fail at doing that and you break things, you get an F. An F is for fired. So how do we get out of doing CF work and focus on those on the AC work? We start to turn our CF tasks into AC work. What that is, I've been doing a lot of baking during this quarantine, and I can make one really great loaf of bread, but it's very manual. I'm taking all the ingredients, putting them together, I'm kneading by hand, maybe I'm using a stand mixer, but I can really only make one at a time, and it's very manual. And if I goof anything about it, water temperature, flour measurements, or anything like that, my bread doesn't turn out. So why do we automate? We automate for consistency. I want everything about my deployment, or in this case, my bread, to be consistent every single time. We also automate for time savings. We want to get out of those CF tasks. We want to get out of that CF work, and we want to start to move up in the stack to the AC workloads. So we want to get out of those things so we can say, hey, I don't want to have to sit down and think that I have to do 10 VM deployments today. I want to have somebody go into a portal and click 10 VMs, and I'm focused on the business projects. And finally, we do it for scalability, because while I can make it really consistent and I know exactly what I need to do, if I automate it and I do it the same way every time, I can start to automate all the pieces to it, and then I can scale. So instead of baking one loaf of bread, I bake 200 loaves of bread. Or instead of deploying one workload, I deploy 20 workloads. So let's talk about this demo. What we're going to do today is we're going to push code from GitHub. We're going to push code from VS Code into GitHub. GitHub is going to tell our Jenkins continuous employment, continuous integration build box to go do the build. Jenkins is going to talk to Terraform and Ansible to actually push the infrastructure pieces in and the application pieces into our Expedient Enterprise Cloud environment. So let's actually go into the demo itself. Before we actually dive into the demo, I want to talk about our API documentation. And our API documentation is actually really good. What we've done is we've taken our Most commonly used API, so Expedient Enterprise Cloud has a fully functional REST API that's publicly accessible at expedient.cloud/API. And what we can do is we can look at some of these code snippets. So things like logging in. This is the exact code snippet on how to do that. Here's the example response. Here's how you actually go do that login. And we've also pulled in some of our other ones that we internally use and some of our customers use. So things like pulling lists of VApps or VMs, or creating power on, power off, and delete. We have all of these here, and all of those code snippets are available to you. So you can pull those into your environment and start using them. My favorite function inside of the documentation is the fact that you can change language. So right now it's set to curl, but maybe I want to use Node.js, or maybe I want to use PowerShell. It's the same code snippet, the same API call, but being done with a different language. So if you have some API people that want to use this and they prefer Python over Node, they can change that and get what they need. This is also running through Postman. So if you're a Postman user, it's an API workspace tool. You can click Run in Postman. It downloads all the collections, downloads all the environment variables, and helps you get started very, very quickly. What that allows you to do is get maybe your developers or somebody who's looking to get started with APIs. It gets them started and helps them really start to build their focus on APIs without having to read through 40 pieces of documentation. It's really, really nice. So we're back in EEC. We're looking at our ACM data center and our 701 data center. And if we go into Visual Studio Code, we can see our main Ansible playbook. So that's this config.yaml file. And in here is our Ansible playbook. It's going to call out to Terraform to do the infrastructure deployment. And then it's going to come back to Ansible and do the application. This is our Terraform file for deploying to EEC. So we have all of the needs, all the things that we need to connect, all of the template names, resources, and everything are all inside of this file. So let's get started with this deployment. I'm going to change one little switch here, and I'm going to do a commit to our GitHub. I'm going to kick off a build to deploy to EEC. So we did the commit, and we do the push. And I'm going to go open our Jenkins box, and to kind of speed things along here, we're going to scan the repository now. We're going to look at the log and see that things have changed. And now I'm going to go look at my build. And in my build, I see our commit message to deploy to EEC. And I can open that up. Now these have 3 steps. There's an Ansible init and a Terraform init. Those are setting up all the prereqs we need for Ansible. So gathering in all of the roles and getting everything set up. What is our inventory that we're going to be using? And then Terraform init gets Terraform stood up and ready to be used. It builds a state file and gets everything prepared so that it can actually run blueprints. So if we open this up, we can actually see the logs of what it's doing. So right now it's doing the deploy to EEC. If we go into EEC, I can go into our ACM data center. I can go to VApps. And I can see that my 2 VMs are deploying. So one of them is the application server, one of them is the database server. If we look at the Terraform file, we can start at the top and we can see our providers. So this is how Terraform not so much obfuscates away, but it helps you connect to that API without having to learn all the individual login commands. So you have the ability to just connect to it and not have to look at code snippets like we looked at earlier. If you want to use that and integrate into your existing tool set, you can, but Terraform can do that as well. As we scroll down, we see our VApps for the application server and the database server. And we can see our application VM. We can see that it's using this Ubuntu template that's inside of EEC. So we're not having to go pull an operating system from somewhere. There's a template waiting for us. The resources that we need. We're configuring DNS and pushing our public key in so that Ansible can do SSH key authentication to log into the box and do all of the app and database deployments. Below, we have the network configuration, and that's variabilized out. So at the top, we have our IP addresses, and we have a local IP address that sits on that local network, and we also have a public IP address so that our external addresses and our external access to that WordPress site work. Below that, we have our database server doing the same thing, using the same template. And at the bottom, we have our IP addresses. So these IP addresses will come out of the Terraform file. They'll go into the Ansible playbook so that Ansible knows how to connect to everything. So if we go back to EEC, we can see that the VApps are deployed and Terraform is turning them on now. So no intervention here from me. If we go into Jenkins, we can see that Jenkins can connect to these boxes and is now moved on to the Ansible part of the playbook where it's going to go deploy the database and the application side. So what does that mean? Inside of this playbook, at the top, we're setting all of our facts so we know how to connect everything. We're doing an apt update to make sure that our package caches are fresh so that when we do our deployments, we're getting the latest versions. We're configuring the database. So we're not passing this off to a database team. There's no manual intervention here. All of the configuration is happening here. And you can even run this through your DBA team to say, what would you need to be in here? Do we need to add the database team to have access? In this case, it's just me, so we don't have any additional teams. So I'm setting this up to just talk to WordPress, the WordPress app server, excuse me. Below that, we're installing PHP and the MySQL client on the app server. So the app server can talk to the database server, has a MySQL client. And then we're deploying Apache. So we're setting all the defaults for Apache, we're setting the external URL, and then configuring WordPress even down to the theme that's going to be used. This is really great, and it also gives you kind of audit superpowers to be able to hand this playbook to your change control team to say, this is exactly what we're going to do. And then you can hand them the logs as the output to say, this is what we did. So if we go into Jenkins, we can see that the database is doing the download and the install of MySQL. It's configuring all of the connection strings. It's configuring all of our user accounts and getting everything set up so that when the application server goes to do its deployment, that it can actually connect and start writing things to that database. So now we're installing PHP, we're installing Apache, and we're installing WordPress, and we're done. So now I've got at the bottom here, I've got 14 changes on the app and database server. We skipped a couple things, but I have a green deployment. So if we now go back up to this tab and I use my DNS entry that I created for this, I can get to that WordPress site. But one of the neat things about automation is that it starts to give you the ability to choose your infrastructure. And we're deploying to EEC. But what I want to do here is I'm going to make a small switch change and I'm going to deploy this to AWS. So as you start to think about your multi-cloud strategy, this is a great way to help you on your way so that you're not getting locked into individual services or individual platforms and being unable to migrate to other things. So I'm going to push a commit to AWS and we'll push that. So in here is our AWS Terraform file. And it's the same general concept. Here's our provider that's connecting us to AWS. We're using the same public key. So Jenkins still has the ability to SSH into the deployed EC2 instances. So it can do the same Ansible packages, the same Ansible configuration, the same playbook, so that it's the same code either way. We're also setting up firewall rules, setting up the access between the application server and the database server, the AMI instances that we're using. So those are the Ubuntu 1604 instances, the same ones that we're using on premises, or not on premises, but in EEC. And we also have our instance types. So we have T2 small and T2 medium. And then finally, we're taking those IP addresses and we're pushing them back out into Ansible. So if we go into Jenkins, I can now see my build to deploy to AWS. So if I click on deploy to AWS, I can see the same thing. We're initializing Ansible, we're initializing Terraform the exact same way and running that same playbook. It's just calling a different Terraform file. That's it. And so we can see that it's doing the deploy. The EC2 instances have now deployed and it's now doing the apt update and all of the MySQL and PHP installs. If we look at the AWS Management Console, we can see our EC2 instances. And I can see that my T2 small and my T2 medium VMs are running. And if I go back into Jenkins, all of the deployment is done. Same playbook, same packages. I'll go in here, I'll grab my public DNS record, and we'll drop that in. So at the end of this, I'll show you guys the GitHub repo where all of this code exists so that you can go download this and you can start kicking the tires. So if you're an existing EEC customer, this is a great way to get started with automation. And if you're looking at this, you can kind of see how EEC can scale. So If you can choose different clouds, why choose EEC? One of the biggest benefits of EEC is that we have a big cohesive infrastructure platform. We can take your physical hardware that you have, mainframes, AIX, HPUX, and we can bring those into our data centers and put them right next to Expedient Enterprise Cloud and provide you access to our cloud native platform, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and have all of those things together. And then we have our delivery and our operations teams. So shout out to our OSC and our delivery teams that provide white glove service around that. So when you have a problem or you have something that you're not really quite sure how to do it, our teams can help you get started and get on your way. We also have a 100% SLA. So if your services are down for whatever reason, you get a service credit. That's the policy. We also do everything on a consumption-based pool. So when you're using your resources, you have an amount of resources and it's a predictable cost per month. So you get all of the scalability and all of the flexibility and the ability to add resources on top of that, but you don't have to worry about, we used 50% of it this month and 150% next month. It's very predictable and streamlined. And finally, now that we're doing all this automation using the API, we can start to turn that towards our cloud native platform. So next week, we're going to be talking about our cloud native platform based on Rancher and Kubernetes. We have a really cool demo planned for that one. I want to give a massive thank you to Mike Morris and Mike Garuccio, who are, Mike Morris is our manager of our solution architecture team, and Mike Garuccio, who's on our product strategy team, for helping me with the code and getting this all built out. They've spent a massive amount of time with me, and I want to thank them for that. If this really interests you, please email me, aj.kuftik@expedient.com. Let's get a test drive going. Let's kick the tires. If you're an existing EEC customer, reach out and let's see what you guys are looking to do and work with the APIs on how we can build your future. If you go to github.com/expedient/EEC-automation-demo, you can see all of the code that I used here. You can use it. You can clone it. If you see things in there that you'd like to change or fix, or you think there's something we could do better, maybe automating DNS records or going out to Let's Encrypt to grab a certificate, do a pull request. Let's see if we can make this get even cooler. And with that, I'm going to open up the Q&A with John White, who's our Chief Innovation Officer, Rob McCafferty, who's our Director of Solution Architecture, and Mike Morris, who's here and is the manager of our Solution Architecture team. So John, Rob, Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. So we have a ton of questions coming in, and Rob and myself, we've been trying to answer them as much as we could live in the Q&A, but we'll hit on a few. There's definitely some themes, so we'll hit on a few here that we've either answered or are still open that are out there. So we got a whole bunch of questions on compliance, so PCI DSS, HIPAA, High Trust, FedRAMP, SOC 1, SOC 2. So we can talk about those a little bit. We do map to a lot of different compliance attestations out there because it's something that's a big part of our business. PCI DSS, the enterprise cloud environment, actually goes through audits specifically for that environment. So does our data centers and a lot of our other managed services that we offer. So I'll give you a yes on the PCI DSS, and there's some still things that you'll need to interact with us to make sure that your applications are fully compliant. The HIPAA High Trust is something that we've been doing for a lot of years now as well, and so we go through specific audits for that compliance. And then we build out the SOC 1 and SOC 2 to then map to a lot of the other compliance that are out there. So I saw some on FedRAMP, on NIST, on ISO. Yes, we have a whole compliance team that will work with you, work with your auditors to then make sure that we're mapping compliance at all the different levels. So that will be for our cloud products as well as our managed service products to make sure that really most of your infrastructure is covered. Some people asked about some of the storage solutions underneath Enterprise Cloud. We don't expose specific APIs to the storage elements, the storage vendors specifically, but vCloud Director has storage-based APIs that you can interact with. So provisioning of storage or changing of storage can be done through a lot of the coding that AJ just showed and featured. And so you kind of have an abstraction layer, so it doesn't really worry about the vendors underneath. We use a lot of different vendors to provide Enterprise Cloud. And again, majority of that's just abstracted to you, the end customer. So you're just consuming the gigabytes of RAM, gigabytes of disk, and then just interacting with it via a public API.
There are a handful of questions around how EEC integrates with the public cloud providers, Azure, AWS, and Google. So, as AJ showed, right, the code that you're using to deploy VMs in EEC can also be quickly and easily modified to deploy workloads in the public cloud. Additionally, from a connectivity perspective, Expedient can provide a cloud on-ramp to any of those public cloud providers and integrate that into our overall offering and solution.
We had some different questions then and on the compliance thing. So somebody asked about GDPR compliance. Yes, that is something that we have some of our customers go through on a regular basis. So again, there's some application stuff that you'll need to go through. But yeah, we have compliance documentation on how we can certify and satisfy that. A lot of questions were asked about security, and that's something that is a very complicated answer. But yeah, the solution, it has to go through the audits, it has to go through all the compliance checks, and the security elements around it are a little bit of a choose your own adventure. We do have a lot of base security built into the feature, into the cloud environment. So microsegmentation, the encryption of data at rest, and there's two-factor authentication to get in, and it integrates with your Active Directory and all this other stuff. So that's all built into it. And then we have a whole bunch of other security products that you can then purchase to then wrap around kind of multiple security layers around your application, just so it's just not just the cloud infrastructure. So yeah, there's a lot of different options we can kind of walk you through to make sure that we hit whatever security compliance you and your team have decided is needed for your cloud applications.
One slightly off-topic question, but I thought it was interesting. Someone asked what topics we have coming up next. So AJ mentioned we're going to do a Rancher and containers session next week. After that, we have some micro-segmentation and some network deep dives sessions scheduled. Beyond that, we're still working through some topics, but I think we'd love to hear your opinion on what you'd like to see us do next. So please, flood AJ's Twitter and LinkedIn and email with your suggestions on what you'd like to see.
Please rec my mentions. It's fine. Go ahead.
So one question somebody asked is, how's replication handled between data centers? We run a 100 gig network throughout all of our different data centers and cloud pops, and we actually interact with a lot of different carrier hotels. So this is a fully redundant network. So when you do replication from site A to site B inside of Expedient, or even into the other cloud providers, the hyperscale cloud providers, that's all done over private links, so that we can do direct connects or whatever you need to a hyperscaler, and then also in between Expedient, and we can then hit replication with a lot of different software. So it can be done inside of the hypervisor, like we've showed in the past in some of the DR demos. It can be done at the secondary storage layer. I mean, there's so many different options on how we can then just make sure that data is replicated, or even in the application. A lot of companies that run Oracle and SQL, they'll use the native tools to then handle replication from one data center to the next.
I'm going to sum up a couple of questions. There were a few around what type of workloads can be run on the Expedient platform, and folks asked specifically about CPU intensive, memory intensive, storage IO intensive. So our offerings and our solutions are tailored based on the need of each individual workload. So part of our process is working with our solution architecture team to gather data and understand the application that we're going to be bringing into the environment, and architecting that solution to make sure that it can meet the performance needs of the application. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of environment.
One of the questions, and we've had a few questions around it, as far as like, does this solution that we showed you today, the automation, so work with Azure? Yeah, I mean, part of what we wanted to show you today was that we're using really standard tools inside of the industry in Terraform and Ansible and in Jenkins to be able to deploy these applications. And really, like AJ showed, with a quick switch inside of the code, the same automation that we built inside of VEC to build this WordPress site could be really deployed out on any cloud that's out there. So all of these, a lot of what we want to show here today is about the extensibility of not only our cloud platform, but some of the tools that our customers are using and we're even using internally to make life easier and make sure that we're not doing the same task over and over and over again. So we can make sure that we're streamlining it, and then every widget always looks the same once we kind of go through this automation side of it.
Yeah, and I just put up the Azure provider from Terraform. So their provider, if you want to get into using Terraform, I think is a really great one. They have a ton of providers that cover a bunch of different technology stacks, not just EEC and the VMware stack. So you have all the hyperscale cloud providers. There's a number of on-premises ones, so things like network switches, storage arrays. So this is all capable of being done. I'm just providing one example.
Yeah, and we work with a lot of other partners to help our customers get this done. So, if you're a partner listening in here, it's something that we definitely, interact with them quite a bit. We have people that are just focused strictly on automation on our platform, and they're going and helping their client base automate inside of Expedient, also automate inside of any really general clouds. So that is an option as well. So, this is something, if you're worried about you're not having the capabilities to perform this type of automation, we can partner you up with somebody to then make sure that your needs are getting addressed that way. So somebody asked specifically about our Phoenix location. Is it in another co-location vendor or Expedient owned? This one, Phoenix, is actually in another co-location vendor. So our enterprise cloud is built in a modular form that we can really drop it into any site. So we dropped one into Phoenix, had it up online very quickly there in transacting for our customers, and we can really do that anywhere. The international sites as well, those are partner data centers. We actually can build enterprise cloud out on our customer site. So some companies that have an existing data center that they purchase, but they still want to start to move towards cloud, we can actually drop it in, give you a per gig of RAM, per gig of disk consumption, and you're off and running inside of your own cloud platform, inside of your own data center. We've gotten a few questions about the slides and things being available after. We're putting all these videos up onto our YouTube channel, so you can see them there, and you can download it and watch them, and check them out there. If you have any questions, obviously we're always available to then follow up in the future.
Yeah, if you're looking for a specific bit of the code, it's all on the GitHub page. I'm available. My contact information is up there. So if you have any specific questions, reach out to me and I'll see if I can't find the answer for you. I saw a number of other questions around Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a free tool. The examples would be all inside of the GitHub. So the code is the same in my Visual Studio Code versus them. They also do syntax checking for things like Terraform and Ansible. So if you want to write that code, install those plugins. There's also a Git plugin that does the push upload. So you could do things and make sure that you don't have tabs or spaces in the wrong place. And it'll also give you like tab completion on things. So if you want to run a command, it'll show you all. You type B and it'll show you all of the commands that start with B. So it's actually a really great tool, and it's free, and I highly recommend it. I also saw this seems like Chef. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah, I mean, Chef and Ansible kind of line up in that configuration management space. But again, we're just showing one set of tools that could be used. Chef has integrations with other automation tool sets. So we're kind of showing that through the APIs of EEC, we're as extensible as anything. So if you want to try it with Chef, we're more than happy to let you kick the tires on it.
We had a few questions around, focusing on cloud adoption trends. How would you answer the question from a customer asking what the common challenges enterprises face during cloud transformation? I think this is a great question and a big conversation. We could probably be here for hours. I'll give you kind of our focus on it. is that we see companies and enterprises, continuing to evolve IT. It's very rare that you can just have a company that's been operating for years and say, hey, we're going to just completely stop everything we're doing on our existing IT and rewrite everything brand new and do cloud native or whatever the hot topic is that week. And so, our focus is to provide people the tools needed to kind of optimize their cloud journey. So whether you still need to host that mainframe in one of our data centers or run virtual machines at scale or build a cloud native application, you can do it all inside of one provider, inside of one cloud environment. And the things that really are crucial and critical to IT, making things secure, making sure they're protected, making sure that you have options for disaster recovery, those are pieces that we can kind of roll all together to create a custom tailored package to your business to make sure that we're fitting your needs. So that's kind of our view on it. The infrastructure is kind of somewhat of the commodity. It's all the other pieces of hybridity as well as in the managed services that can kind of make it unique to your company, which is where the value lies in our opinion.
Hey, congratulations to Ralph Johnston. You were the winner of the Bo speaker. Karen, who's on our marketing team, will be reaching out to you. So congratulations, Ralph.
Yeah, Ralph. So we're gonna answer some questions like we did in the past. And so if you want to hang on, go for it. And if you want to keep putting in questions, we'll answer the ones that you're asking right away live. But there's a lot of different, a lot of different places we can go with it.
I see a question here. Where does the compliance and governance occur with this code? This is part of the overall automation framework that you would start to build as you move towards moving out of those CF tasks into AC code or into AC work. And that's where you take that code and you start to look at it and say, okay, we need to look at our code and do code review and make sure that nobody's putting things in there that shouldn't be in there or are having variables pulling in secrets from the wrong places. So that's more of an internal process. It's not something that we govern. We're providing the endpoints. It's up to you and who's writing your code in order to do that. This code that we wrote, this is free for you to use. This is just example code. So if you're not, if you want to write your own code, write your own API calls, those are up to you and your organization to figure out how to handle governance on that code. How do we handle error performance reporting? We have a number of different, we have two main different options. We have vRealize Operations is handling the VMware stack inside of EEC. We also offer Elasticsearch as a service. So if you want to use Elastic for log management, dashboards, those sorts of things, we can definitely get you set up with Elastic as well. So if you want to integrate Elastic into your automation stack or into your EEC stack, we can do that. We also use VMware's Log Insight tool for log management. So there's a number of different options based on what you're looking to do.
So we had some people asking about like WAN circuits and ordering their own circuits into our data centers for hybrid cloud. Yeah, that's all available. So we are carrier agnostic. We have a lot of different carriers per data center, and then we can interconnect with them at the carrier hotels. But if you have somebody that you would prefer, or you already have maybe a negotiated rate, you can actually go and bring in your own carrier, and we're just fine with that. Some people asked about bringing over VMware skills into the enterprise cloud environment. Yes, so this whole platform is built off of VMware. So if you have VMware certifications, or if you've been utilizing VMware for a lot of years, like most people in the industry, yeah, that all translates over here pretty nicely, and you should have a very easy and quick learning curve to get up to speed and operate in the cloud environment over here. So we had some questions about the customer control of which data center locations and people worried about kind of data movement. You actually are in full control of which data centers you want to live in. So you can pick, and you can make sure that there's no way that your data would automatically just be moved out. So you can pick your primary, your secondary, your tertiary, whatever it might be, to make sure that if you have unique compliance, or if you're just worried about data sprawl or where the data could go, you know exactly where it's living, and you'd be able to kind of satisfy any need there.
There were a handful of questions around what type of compute do we offer? Is it shared? Is it dedicated? So, we offer options for either. We have a shared compute environment that some folks can take advantage of at a granular level. And we have some dedicated or private cloud options as well to meet, those types of workload needs.
Mm-hmm. So we're looking at, I saw Kubernetes would be a good topic. Yep. So we'll definitely talk more about that next week, which is awesome.
Come on back next week. We'll be here.
Yep. We have a lot of different topics we could talk about, but cloud native and Kubernetes is probably one of the biggest and the hottest things that we're talking about right now with clients that are going and doing some dev tests and even running into production. So we have a lot of cool use cases that AJ is going to show you next week. Let me see if there's any new live questions in there. Is there a way to auto scale my app pods? And that's, that's something that we're going to, I'm not sure what layer you're talking about there, but we're going to talk a little bit about auto scaling in next week's demo inside of Kubernetes. But yes, there's ways to auto scale at the virtual machine level as well. I think Mike Ruccio, who AJ mentioned, has done a few demos out there, and I think we can push those out to our YouTube channel if they're not there to kind of show you what that looks like.
Do you use any product to check your own code for vulnerabilities? We don't specifically use one, mostly because we're writing generally a simple, infrastructure code that's only used by ourselves. But there are a number of products that are out on the market that will do code review and look for vulnerabilities, things like putting secrets into config files and that sort of stuff. So there's a number of different ways to go about that. We just don't have, we don't offer any of them as a service though. What's the key benefit of Jenkins integration, and is it HIPAA compliant? So, Valerie, the key benefit of Jenkins integration is the ability to take your code and have it go do the build instead of it running locally from your machine to the infrastructure. It helps you centralize things and it helps you collaborate across a team. So if Mike wanted to push a code build in, he could do that and Jenkins would go do that build and I would be able to see his build history, and the same thing with mine. But in terms of it being HIPAA compliant, that's going to be up to your deployment. So we don't offer the automation as a service. We're interested to hear if people want automation as a service or the automation platform as a service. But in terms of how do we build, or how does Jenkins stay HIPAA compliant, I'm sure there's a number of security processes that have to go through that and baselines around that. But as far as I'm aware, there's nothing off the top of my head.
So there was a few questions on scalability of the platform. So one of the questions was, how many VMs do you need to make this make sense? We have customers that have a handful of VMs. We have customers that have, tens of thousands of VMs. So it really, runs the gamut. I think automation is really good at any level, especially if you're looking at it and there's just, task work that you're doing that doesn't make sense because every time you're getting a different result. Even automating something like a few server build makes a ton of sense if you want to do dev environments, or if you want to do testing and do patching against it, or you just want a developer to have a similar environment that's running in production that you want to run do your coding against. All that automation up front to kind of make sure the build is the same will help in any of those initiatives and make sure that you're being as efficient with your time as possible, because that's really what's most important. And you can, on the scaling side, how many VApps can be done? We've tested the platform, and you can like AJ said, you can bake 1 or 2 loaves of bread. You can bake 1,000 loaves of bread if you want at the same time. Once that automation's written, it's just about scaling it out to the cloud environment, and then make sure that the subscribed resources you're using are available for you to continue just build applications. When we have customers doing DR tests and big migrations, that we're doing hundreds of servers at a time as part of those tests. So really the system and the platform has been built to make sure it can handle any of those style boot storms and make sure that resources available for the production workloads that are already running and the new ones you're building.
And John, you mentioned kind of dev test environments. I think one of the unique things that we offer is providing dev test environments as part of or integrated in with our DR solution, so that there's not a waste of resources. So the clients can have DR, dev test, all in a very economic way, so that they don't have to make the decision to maybe eliminate one of those environments due to budgetary constraints.
I think we answered most of it. Let's see if anybody wants to throw in a live question right here towards the end. And
I saw someone like the ACCF work tasks. That's a great one. Is that Brian that came up with that one, or Brian heard that one?
Yeah, it's something we've been using internally for a while now. It's very, very relevant. And if you read some of the books, like one of my favorites, the Phoenix Project, you can start to pick the AC and CF tasks inside of that book, and you could probably start to relate to some of that in your everyday work life, because there's a lot of things that you probably do that aren't really that key to actually opening up new doors for new customers, but are really just keeping the lights on. Cool. Well, I think we answered majority of the questions here.
I want to thank everybody for joining us. If anybody sneaks in with a last second question, we'll try our best to answer that here. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. We'll be back here next week, 12:30 p.m. We're here every week at 12:30 p.m. Next week is Rancher and Kubernetes. So if you want to check out our cloud native platform, we'll be here. The week after that is microsegmentation. And if you've got an idea for one of these webinars, one of these demos, something you want to see, send me an email, aj.kuftic@expedient.com. Tweet me at AJ Kuftic. Please rack my mentions, and let's get some content that you guys want to see too. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
Cool. Thank you.